Welcome to Supernatural Tales from Mammal's Front Porch, the podcast where ghost stories aren't just campfire tales, they're family tradition. I'm Heather Perrin, author, lover of haunted history, believer in the unexplained, and your host for this storytelling journey into eerie folklore, fictional frights, and true paranormal encounters from around the United States. Each week, I'll be sharing tales that are a little strange, a little spine-tingling, and maybe, just maybe, true. So grab a mason jar of sweet tea, pull up a chair, and settle in. Because here on Mammal's Front Porch, we believe the veil is just a little thinner when the sun goes down, and the stories, well, they have a way of finding you. Welcome back to Supernatural Tales from Mammal's Front Porch. As I mentioned at the end of last week's episode, this week we will take a trip to Salem, Massachusetts. This will be broken into two parts as a Halloween special. In part one, we'll dig deep into the Salem Witch Trials, visit Gallows Hill, and take a trip back to the Old Salem Jail. In part two, we'll tour the Turner Ingersoll Mansion, the Joshua Ward House, and finally the Witch House. So settle in and get ready to take a spooky trip around Salem with me. If you've ever been to Salem, Massachusetts, you know the feeling long before you know the story. There's a strange heaviness that clings to the sea air, something that's part salt, part sorrow, and part something else entirely. The streets are narrow and old. The buildings lean toward one another as if whispering secrets. Cobblestones shine with mist from the Atlantic, and even on bright autumn mornings, the town feels haunted. Not just by ghost, but by memory as well. Because Salem isn't just a town. It's a wound that never really healed. The year was 1692, and what happened here over those few short months would stain the name Salem forever. It began in the dead of winter, when the air was brittle and the nights long, in a small Puritan village on the edge of the Massachusetts wilderness. A group of young girls began to act strangely. They screamed without cause, convulsed, and claimed to see visions of specters tormenting them. The village doctor, unable to explain what he saw, declared the cause to be witchcraft. And with that one word, an invisible fire began to spread. At the center of the storm was Reverend Samuel Parris, minister of Salem Village. His daughter Betty and his niece Abigail Williams were among the first afflicted. They accused 3 women of tormenting them: Tituba, an enslaved woman of Caribbean descent; Sarah Good, a destitute beggar; and Sarah Osborne, who had scandalized the town by living with a man out of wedlock. The accusations were shocking, but in a society built on strict religion and fear of the devil, they were also believable. The Puritans believed Satan was as real as the ground beneath their feet, and that witches were his earthly agents. Soon, the accusations spread like wildfire. Neighbors turned on neighbors, old grudges resurfaced. People who lived side by side for years suddenly saw each other as enemies. And all the while, the afflicted girls screamed and pointed, naming more and more supposed witches. By spring, dozens had been accused. The magistrates formed a special court to handle the trials, the Court of Oyer and Terminer. It was led by men like Samuel Judge Samuel Sewall, Judge William Stoughton, and Judge Jonathan Corwin. Names that would forever be tied to the tragedy that followed. The rules of evidence were loose, to put it mildly. Ordinary proof wasn't enough. The court accepted something called spectral evidence, which meant that if someone claimed to see a ghostly image or specter of a person tormenting them, that testimony was considered valid. Imagine that for a moment. Being condemned to die just because someone claimed your spirit pinched or choked them in a dream? That's crazy to me. But I think it was normal back then, especially with the hysteria. Between June and September of 1692, 20 innocent people were executed, 19 hanged on Gallows Hill, and one man, Giles Corey, pressed to death beneath heavy stones for refusing to enter a plea. Dozens more languished in cold, filthy jail cells awaiting trial. The youngest accused was just 4 years old. Fear had gripped the town so tightly that reason itself seemed to vanish. People confessed to impossible things just to escape the noose. Others stood defiant, maintaining their innocence until their last breath. Eventually, the madness burned itself out. When Governor William Phipps's own wife was accused, he disbanded the court. The remaining prisoners were released, and over time, the colony quietly admitted that grave mistakes had been made. But by then, the damage was done, and it was irreversible. Families were shattered, property was seized, and an invisible stain spread across the land, a darkness that would never really lift. Salem's witch trials lasted less than a year, but the echoes of those months have lasted more than 3 centuries. And if you talk to the people who live there today, they'll tell you that those echoes are still very much alive. Walk through Salem at night and you can feel it, that strange blend of beauty and unease. The lamplight glows amber against old brick, and the ocean wind carries the faint smell of wood smoke. But beneath it all, there's a tension, like the ground remembers. The first place most people feel it is Gallows Hill, or what's now called Proctor's Ledge. For years, the exact location of the hangings was shrouded in mystery. Folklore had long placed the executions at the top of the hill, but in 2016, careful historical research and archaeological evidence confirmed that the condemned were actually executed on a rocky slope just below, near modern-day Boston Street. It's a quiet patch of land now, but the stones beneath your feet are soaked in centuries of fear, grief, and desperation. The ledge itself is stark, exposed to wind and weather, and even today, it feels unnervingly elevated, as though it keeps watch over the town below. On clear days, you can see Salem spread beneath it, the harbor glinting like a mirror, but on foggy mornings, the slope seems to vanish into the mist, as if the air itself remembers the horrors it once witnessed. A semicircle of granite stones now marks the memorial for the victims, each engraved with a name. 20 stones stand as silent witnesses to the injustice carried out here. Innocent men and women who were accused, condemned, and executed. The site is carefully maintained, but that calm exterior belies the history that unfolded here. On the morning of an execution, wagons would roll slowly through the village, carrying the accused, bound and shackled, heads held high in defiance or bowed in terror. They faced a crowd of neighbors and townspeople. The hangings were public events meant to demonstrate the triumph of righteousness over evil. Yet, what was meant as justice was cruel beyond measure. The condemned were often forced to confess sins they did not commit or maintain their innocence to their deaths. Historical accounts describe a chilling scene. Women in torn gowns, hair wild from fright, men shaking but resolute, eyes wide with disbelief as the noose was fitted around their necks. And while the hangings were legal under the standards of the time, to modern eyes, they were acts of horror, compounded by fear, ignorance, and religious zealotry. The site has long been considered one of Salem's most haunted. Locals and visitors alike describe strange phenomena on fog-laden evenings. Some hear distant cries and sobbing carried on the wind as if the accused are still calling out for justice. Shadows have been seen moving along the slope, sometimes shaped like the human form, thin and stooped, lingering where the wagons and nooses once were. One man who lived near Proctor's Ledge reported that his dog would refuse to go outside after dark, growling at empty air and bristling at invisible presences. A woman recounted hearing the sound of a rope creaking and swaying, even though no trees or supports remained to make such noise. Paranormal investigators have noted sudden cold spots, particularly around the granite memorial, and some have recorded faint, almost imperceptible whispers, repeating the names of the victims or the word innocent in a low, mournful tone. More than a few visitors report a sense of heaviness, as though the air itself presses against them. One woman describes standing near the ledge and feeling a strange sensation in her chest, a tightening accompanied by a sudden urge to look over her shoulder, though no one was there. Some have claimed to see fleeting figures on the periphery of their vision, glimpses of people in 17th century clothing vanishing when turned toward. Even during the day, the energy of Proctor's Ledge can be unsettling. It's not violent or aggressive. It doesn't feel like malevolent. Oh my gosh, I can't talk today. Doesn't feel like malevolent spirits are present, but it's profoundly sorrowful. Many who visit leave with a lingering melancholy, as if they have briefly stepped into the shadow of the fear, grief, and injustice that once swept through Salem. Historians remind us that these were ordinary people, farmers, homemakers, and children, who became caught in a wave of mass hysteria. But at Proctor's Ledge, the human stories are palpable. You can imagine Martha Corey standing resolute, or Rebecca Nurse dignified and calm, waiting for her fate. The land itself seems to remember their fear, their dignity, and the ultimate injustice inflicted upon them. Even in modern times, the site continues to claim attention. Photographers and ghost hunters report cameras malfunctioning, lights flickering, or digital recordings capturing sounds that have no apparent source. Visitors have described feeling a gentle, inexplainable tug at their sleeves or a whisper brushing against their ear when no one else is near. Proctor's Ledge serves as a solemn reminder the tragedy of the Salem Witch Trials did not end with the executions. It left a lingering imprint, a residual echo that persists even centuries later. Each stone, each gust of wind across the ledge carries a fragment of memory, a testimony to innocence lost, to fear gone unchecked, and to the haunting permanence of injustice. If you follow Boston Street toward downtown Salem, you'll pass by the Old Salem Jail, another place steeped in centuries of sorrow and tragedy. The original structure was built in 1692, right at the height of the witch trials, and it was here that many of the accused were first confined. It was a place designed not for comfort or fairness, but for control and intimidation. Prisoners were thrown into damp, windowless cells, chained to the cold stone walls, and forced to sleep on the floor alongside rats and other vermin. The air was thick with the stench of human waste, mold, and despair. Food was meager, often spoiled, and some prisoners perished from disease or starvation before they even had the chance to stand trial. The jail itself became a character in the story of Salem, its stones absorbing the fear, anguish, and whispered confessions of those who were held inside. Accounts from the period describe the cries of the accused echoing through the halls at all hours. Women crying their innocence, men praying desperately, children trembling in the dark. Those sounds, unrecorded yet vivid in historical accounts, are said to still linger. Even today, when you approach the building, the heavy, oppressive energy is smothering, as though the walls themselves remember each fearful heartbeat. In the centuries that followed, the jail was rebuilt and expanded, becoming a functional correctional facility well into the 19th and 20th centuries. During this time, it housed a wide array of prisoners, from debtors and petty criminals to hardened felons. Executions were carried out in the jail yard, and many men and women met their end behind its cold, unyielding walls. Tales from the 1800s describe prisoners who would scream for hours only to be ignored, their voices swallowed by stone and mortar. Others were reported to vanish mysteriously within the jail, their deaths attributed to disease or misfortune, but locals whispered about darker forces at work. When the jail finally closed in the 1990s, it was slated for renovation, intended to become apartments and a restaurant, but almost immediately those who worked there began reporting strange and unsettling occurrences. Tools would disappear and reappear in impossible places, lights flickered in empty corridors, and workers often felt unseen eyes following their every move. One man claimed to have seen a figure dressed in colonial-era clothing walking calmly down a locked hallway, only to vanish when approached. Another worker reported the eerie sound of chains dragging across the stone floors in the middle of the night, despite no one else being present. Paranormal investigators and historians alike have noted that the building seems particularly active near the old holding cells. Cold spots appear suddenly, sometimes so intense that the workers or visitors feel as if unseen hands have brushed against their skin. Whispering voices drift through the halls, and sometimes clear enough to make out words like innocent, confess, or pray. Some have even reported faint sobbing, low murmurs of prayer, and the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. There are also specific stories tied to individuals from the witch trials. One account tells of an apparition of a young girl, no more than 10 years old, clutching a tattered doll, wandering the corridors as though searching for her family. Another reports a woman's shadow lingering near the door of a former cell, fading when approached, yet leaving a chilling sense of lingering grief. Objects reportedly move on their own, chains swinging, doors creaking open, candles extinguished by invisible drafts, heightening the sense that the building itself holds the echoes of the accused. Even today, despite being a recognized historic landmark, The Old Salem Jail retains its somber, unnerving presence. Tourists who pass by often report an unexplained heaviness in the air, a sense of being watched, or fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures darting just beyond their vision. Guides say that standing near the old cells, you can almost hear the echoes of the past, the quiet prayers, the soft sobs, the muttered confessions, all mingling with the chill that seems to seep from the walls themselves. It's a place where history and hauntings intersect, a living testament to the fear, suffering, and injustice that defined Salem during its darkest hour. The Old Salem Jail is more than stone and mortar. It's a vessel of memory carrying the sorrow of centuries. And for those willing to feel it, it's impossible to walk away without sensing that the past never truly leaves these walls. In our next episode, we'll visit a few more locations in and around Salem. I hope you'll join me. Until then, thank you for spending time on the porch with me. If you liked today's episode, be sure to follow the show, leave a review, and tell a friend who loves a good spooky story. You can also find me on Facebook at Supernatural Tales from Mammal's Front Porch for more updates, behind the scenes fun, and the occasional eerie extra. And if you'd like to support the podcast and get access to bonus content, sneak peeks, and more, come visit me over on Patreon. I'd love to have you join me on the front porch. All of these things will be linked in the show notes. This has been Supernatural Tales from Mammal's Front Porch, and I'm your host, Heather. Keep your porch light on. You never know who or what might stop by.